when we argue. That's why they don't invite us.
Next question is for Hugh. It comes from Bob Chardon. If I mispronounced your name, I'm sorry. He asks, what is the status of Benghazi Gate today?
The emails are out. They are circulating through there, having an enormously damaging impact on the president. And continue to watch that place. It is significant. It is a cover-up, and it will not stay covered up.
Michael Dave from Chagrin Falls asks, how do we push through the mainstream media bias to get our message heard?
Well, the most important thing to do is to listen to WHK. And to call in. Though most people, one of the fascinating things, one of the first things I was told when I first started my talk radio show 16 years ago, is always remember the callers don't represent the listeners. Most people who listen to talk radio never call in, particularly women. Women are too smart. I mean, it takes a guy usually to wait for 20 minutes, half hour, for some few minutes on the air where the chances are on many shows, certainly not those of my colleagues, but that the host is going to shout at you. I mean, okay, look, you break through the media bias. First of all, I honestly believe, I believe in newspapers, and I like newspapers. I will make a confession here. I'm a very old school guy. I like Dead Trees versions of newspapers. I rip things out, I highlight them in yellow highlighter. I carry clippings around with me everywhere. In the next room I have a bag bulging with old clippings that I can't bear to throw out. But you can break through the left-wing media bias very easily. If you read both the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times every morning, you will be an informed American. And you should read the New York Times because it's important to see what the other side is saying. And they also, particularly their foreign reporting, some of it is pretty good. So really, it's one of those things. This is very different from what it was that Ronald Reagan faced. Because he had 3 networks, ABC, CBS, NBC. That was it. The Wall Street Journal was it. There was no Weekly Standard. There was no internet. There was no Let Freedom Ring. Really, we have a very, very great opportunity. And that's one of the good developments in America, one of those other areas where we've won. Media, on balance, are less one-sided than ever before. We have a voice, and because of you, that voice is going to get louder and stronger.
For Hugh, a mother writes, I am a mother of a naval officer who is deployed. I am concerned about President Obama's dismissive attitude and policies towards our Navy. Please comment.
Well, I say to moms out there who do that, that's very difficult. Thank you for his service. I'm the father-in-law of a naval officer who's deployed, and it's an interesting thing as a civilian to enter into that world and find out what it's like, and to recognize that military families carry burdens that no one else really knows, and civilians don't certainly know. I thought that his comment in the last debate, President Obama's comment about the Navy, was dismissive, insulting, deeply wounding, and I know that from my email box. And I do not believe I could have heard President Reagan or President Clinton or President Bush or President Kennedy, a naval officer, issue, well said, Michael, issue that kind of a statement, and it was I think, simply condemning of his capacity as a commander-in-chief.
For Dennis, I want to ask you to comment on the recent series of presidential debates. You know, presidential debates this year seem to have had a more significant impact on the presidential race than perhaps at any time in our lifetimes, certainly more than any time since President Kennedy's famous debate in 1960, but I suspect even more significant than that. What have we learned from the debates, and how do we properly interpret the actions and activities of their moderators, styles which went all across the board and which I think many of us don't fully understand or appreciate.
Well, to take the second one first and briefly, I thought Jim Lehrer did a magnificent job because Jim Lehrer was not the object of the attention of the American public. The media have terrible hubris. They not only believe in themselves and in their greatness, but they are wounded if they are not the creators of news. And if it's not filtered through the media, they are upset. Even debates, presidential debates, are to be filtered through the medium of the moderator. Jim Lehrer just decided to let them talk to one another and debate one another. Well, did you really say that? Do you mean that? Well, what do you mean by that? Instead of 2 minutes are up, we move on to another subject. That's not a debate. That's where the moderator controls. But the media, like the left, the DNA of the left is totalitarian. This took me a long time to realize. That doesn't mean that your cousin who is on the left is a totalitarian. It means that leftism, it has at its core a desire to control people. It doesn't trust people, it trusts experts. Experts will tell you how to live. Ideally, what the temperature of your home would be. That truly is a left-wing ideal. To have central planning somewhere in your city decide what temperature your house will be. We are the most controlled state where I live in California, and we are, everything possible is regulated, and it has had a horrific effect on life. Europe is completely regulated. In Germany, you cannot keep your store open past a certain hour because it's unfair to the next guy who may want to go home for the evening. So it's actually the law. You have to close your store at a certain hour. And that is a dream. That is the ultimate egalitarian dream, where everything is controlled, including how much you can truly spend on your own health care. The government ideally will tell you what is available to you, and depending on your age and so on. I had 2 herniated disc surgeries a couple of years ago. So bad was my pain that I never missed a lecture, I am proud to say. But I was wheeled from the airplane gate to the baggage. I was in such pain. And the woman, when I went to a speech in Toronto, the woman who wheeled me said, "Why am I wheeling you?" And I said, "Because I'm too much pain from sciatica." And she said, "Yeah, well, I have that." I said, "Well, what did your MRI say?" She said, "Well, I'm just waiting to get one." I said, "How long are you waiting?" 6 months. 6 months? I said, I don't really want to make you feel bad at all, but I got one the next day. The doctor wrote up my prescription. I called up one of the many MRI places in LA and I got an MRI. I said, "Oh, there's a 6-month wait here unless it's an emergency." And Canadians say, "Oh, it's terrific, we're thrilled," because they don't know better. And so they're thrilled. But a lot of Canadians are not thrilled. And they finally decided that you can't have private medical care. Anyway, the controlling instinct is the big one. What was the first question? I'll do that quicker. That was question number 2. What was question number 1? Oh, the debate? Oh, very quickly. My theory is that so many Americans have been undecided that that's the reason that so many watch the debate. And they have been so utterly misled about Mitt Romney that to actually see him unfiltered through ads and the media found a very likable, very respectable, very presidential, very knowledgeable, very, very calm, in control of himself human being. And this blew Americans' minds.
Khalid Thomas of Cleveland asks, did you notice how the alleged constitutional scholar Barack Obama failed miserably when asked to define the role of government?
That was the only time he failed. He would have flunked my class. I'm going to say a thing about the Constitution here. My friend Al Pacino. 4th grade, Blessed Sacrament. You know, I went to I can't even believe I'm doing this sometimes with these guys. I went to St. Pius X, St. Mary's, Blessed Sacrament, John F. Kennedy. Obviously, I'm a Jewish kid. And so I I've been thinking about these HHS regulations. He flunked the Constitution mostly on these HHS regulations, right? I'm going to tell you a quick story, and I want to talk about Israel, so I'm going to ask the next question, so I'm going to jump in here. Here's my quick story. Last night, you come to these things, I don't know why, we're free. We get 3 hours a day, I think you'd be sick of us. You come to see John. Or you come to see if we're really who we say we are, if we're authentically this way. So last night, I'm standing around in the kitchen hallway. Dennis is being introduced, and the film is running. And so Michael and I and John are sitting around the kitchen hallway, and John has talked to all the wait staff and been wonderful, and Michael and I are chatting. And they said, John, who's the best director you've ever worked with? I'd asked this, met that before. He said, he's going to say John Schlesinger. And sure enough, he said, John Schlesinger. And I know. And Michael said, have you seen the movie? I think Michael knew the answer. No, I haven't seen Midnight Cowboy. You want to know why? When it came out in 1969, I was 14. The Roman Catholic Church had a list in the Catholic Exponent in Youngstown. It had a C next to it. That meant condemned, John. No, I don't watch movies for the first time on video. I've seen, obviously, some of the most famous clips with Rizzo and I'm Joe Buck and all that stuff. But I was thinking about it today, about the community in which I grew up. It was thoroughly Catholic. Though my father was Presbyterian, thoroughly Catholic. John F. Kennedy High School will no more allow its health insurance to carry contraception, sterilization, in the morning after pill. How many are Catholics here, by the way? All right? You know what? The future of our church depends not only upon a Mormon, but upon a Jew named Josh Mandel. And don't forget. I swell with pride when I think about he would be the Ohio senator. I had Ted Cruz on today, who's going to be an amazing senator from Texas. I don't think of Ted as Catholic, of course he is. I think of him as extraordinarily talented, the kind of man or woman that I want the United States Senate to represent me. And I look at Josh Mandel, who has served 2 tours as a combat Marine, president of The Ohio State University. Really an amazing American. You got to work so hard to put him in here. But I also think about a Mormon, Mitt Romney, who's going to stand up there and reverse these HHS regulations, and then critically, my question, stand for Israel. And what I've heard about in the last 5 things I've done with these guys is how support for the state of Israel is so deep among people who love freedom. My friend Voigt here has just explained it over and over again. I hope he brought his letter. But so my question is, why? And do you expect Mitt Romney to stand where Barack Obama hasn't, John?
You know, I went on this tour with Glenn Beck about a year ago. And almost everyone of the tour group were evangelical Christians. And it was a remarkable 3 days that we spent together. And I want to just relate one moment of it. We were going to have a huge event at the western door of the temple. We had permission to do that amazingly. And the group was as large as this, and maybe twice as large. And we were in a big long line, and my purpose there at that time was to be a kind of a cheerleader and keep everybody going, and there was a long wait, and so I went up and down the line, took pictures with everybody, and I knew them by that time. I had spoken to them, and we had some fun. And I got to the entrance door, and the line was behind me, this huge long line, and I heard a cheer go up. I mean, a rousing cheer. It was wonderful. It spread down the line, and I didn't know who it was. I thought it was maybe Prime Minister Netanyahu or Elvis or something. I don't know what it was. And I got up on one of these ancient stones to look to see what it was, and it was a small squad of Israeli soldiers. It was fantastic. It was so powerful to me. And they probably didn't even know what is this? As they're running across to get to their truck or whatever it was, And it was so powerful. The The greatest friend of Israel today are the evangelical Christians across the world.
And right here.
And I thought, this is an amazing moment in time, something is happening. And then I see, and we've all seen this, and actually I'd like to go down the line here. You know, I'm so honored to be with these guys, and I'm so impressed with their brilliance and their eloquence. But I'd just like to just make this fun for us. I would like to have each one of them say a word about Obama's, maybe take one section of Obama's insulting behavior toward Israel. And then I'll finish it off and I'll read the piece.
You don't refuse to meet with the Prime Minister of Israel when he requests a meeting.
At the same time that you're making time to meet with the distinguished ladies of The View, that was truly adding insult to injury. Let me acknowledge, we have a truly important Israeli leader with us tonight. Didn't know he was going to be here. But my friend, Ambassador Yoram Ettinger. Yoram, you want to stand up for a moment? That I maintain being so well informed about Israel is because Yoram sends me stuff about twice a week. And you should get it too, really. He has a From the Jerusalem Cloakroom. And it's insider stuff about what's going on in Israel. And the reason I'm confident about Mitt Romney, and I think that was the question that was on the table, and it's twofold. First of all, the history of the association of his particular church with the reborn state of Israel is very profound. And most people don't know this, and I know it's kind of heavy duty, but it's kind of fascinating. Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, the prophet to members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in 1840, 4 years before his death, dispatched one of his original disciples, whose name was Orson Hyde, to Jerusalem. At the time, Jerusalem was a tiny town of 20,000. Today, Greater Jerusalem has 80,000 people. 800,000 people. And in any event, Orson Hyde came to Jerusalem, sent by Joseph Smith for the purpose of preparing the ground to help lead the Jewish people back to their city. And he actually constructed an altar, which is today the site of BYU Jerusalem, the Brigham Young University campus in Jerusalem. And the prayer that he inscribed on that altar is part of regular LDS liturgy. It's a deeply Zionist church. By the way, that's true for a lot of evangelical churches in America. There was a book that was written 4 years later after Orson Hyde in 1844 by a guy named George Bush, no relation we don't think, but who was a professor of Hebrew at New York University. And he wrote a book called The Valley of the Vision, which was a fantasy that was supposed to take place 100 years later, that would be 1944, of the United States Army in 1944 leading the Jewish people back in triumph to their ancient homeland. This is, by the way, 50 years before Theodor Herzl and the beginning of modern Jewish Zionism. There were a group here in the United States of remarkable Christian restorationists. And by the way, Mitt Romney has always had that feeling. He's done business in Israel. When he was working at his first job out of business school, he worked 2 desks away from another new hire from MIT Business School, whose name was Benjamin Netanyahu. And they do, as the New York Times reported, they talk on the phone every week. Romney has asked Prime Minister Netanyahu for political advice. Don't know what Bibi said, but it was probably good advice. And most importantly of all, and this really is the essence of it, there is the very core of Mitt Romney's being, an understanding that not everything in the world is nuanced and a gray area and smudged and a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Sometimes there is clear good, sometimes there is clear evil. And the very essence of Israel's struggle for survival, the very essence of it, Alan Dershowitz, who is a big liberal, he said it very well. The very essence of Israel's struggle is this. Everyone in the world knows that if the Palestinians put down their arms, there would be peace tomorrow. And we also know that if the Israelis put down their arms, there would be genocide tomorrow. It is survival versus continued existence. It's life versus death. It's good versus evil. Thank you.
Well, we were asked for a one-sentence answer. Some of us, often I violated, but whenever my colleagues violated, they're good. And it was worth hearing every word of that. I have a one-sentence answer and then a quick comment on what Michael said. Here's my one-sentence answer. When I think of this president's view of Vladimir Putin and his view of Benjamin Netanyahu, I recall, and I paraphrase a famous Talmudic statement, and that is, those who are kind to the cruel will be cruel to the kind. It's a living rule of life, and that explains the left to a great deal. It hated Ronald Reagan far more than it hated Leonid Brezhnev. That was what turned me off to the left in the final analysis, when I realized they hated the wrong things. Conservatives hate evil, and the left hates carbon emissions. No, I mean it very sincerely. That they would be happy to have that on their tombstone. We hated carbon emissions. And that has been true my entire life. They have hated trivial problems. We hate real evil. And it's much easier to confront trivia than it is to confront evil. I just want to say one thing about all the Christian support for Israel. And that is that there's many things I want to say. I'll only say one right now. And that is that this is the one true Judeo-Christian country that was ever established. And it continues to be the one great Judeo-Christian.
So I want my second line, which is to ask John if he brought his letter with him.
It's a love letter to Israel.
I just want to say before I read it, I watched this president first visiting Israel to get the votes of the Jewish people. And that's what he referred to in the debate when he said, I have been to Israel, I've been to Sderot. And as soon as he got the vote, he never returned. His response to Israel has been totally the other since his presidency, starting with his the visit from Netanyahu, where he made Benjamin Netanyahu come through the back door, refused to take a photograph with him, and after the discussion was over, left him to have dinner by himself. And then, of course, we saw the fiasco at the Democratic Convention when they, and this is what they really feel, folks, when they wanted to put on their platform for the Jewish vote, by the way, for the vote, that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel. And at the last minute, they opened that to the floor, and what happened? We saw, no! No, they didn't want it. That's who they are. And everything in the Middle East, this jihadist movement, which became not the Arab Spring, but the jihadist spring, you know, the manipulation of our government created a state rank with Israel hatred in each intervention. So Israel is in more danger now than any time in their history, and they've been battling for their existence from the beginning. I have these words which I have composed to express my feelings about Israel. Israel is God's gift to all mankind, because Israel is a sole reminder of the survival of the Jewish people. After the slaughter of 6 million men, women, and children, the survivors found strength in God to believe they must find new land, new refuge, new beginning, to keep the Jewish legend alive, to fulfill God's promise that they are his chosen people and must never be driven to extinction.